I'm very excited and terrified. Okay.
Can we have a little demonstration?
God, no, because I'm just, oh God, it's not bad. It's inconsistent.
Yeah, that's good.
Right.
And
This is my director's cut.
Bismillah, it's Mr. Islah. You are watching or listening to the Director's Cut podcast, where we talk all things ethnic within the entertainment industry. Now, my next guest, I'm so excited to announce and to introduce. But as always, every guest gets a special intro.
I'm very excited and terrified. Okay.
In a world where entertainment was rare, she was an AI we know as Andromeda. Some say she's supernatural because she doesn't seem to age. And she taught Oliver Queen everything he knows. Her name is Lexa.
Oh my God, that makes me feel so cool.
Hey, because you are cool, man.
I'll take it. Yeah, tell my kids that, please. They would disagree.
Thank you so much, man. Honestly, it's not every day someone like yourself would make time for a stranger across the globe.
Oh, I'm down. I'm always down for stuff like that.
Just to warm up, what I like to do is throw 3 pop questions. What's your favorite accent to perform other than your own?
Probably English, because that's the one I do best, but I don't do it that well. Like, I mean, it's one of those things where anybody who's not actually from the UK probably buys my English accent. Anybody who's from the UK goes, no.
Wait, can we have a little demonstration? Say anything.
Oh God,
like,
no, because I'm just, oh God.
It's cool. You got me. I can give you a 10-star rating, depending how you read anything. Is there like a book in front of you or something? Like you can just read?
They're
A
all
cereal
boring.
box?
I have like, no, I don't. I have, what do I have? I've got nothing. I've got nothing. It's not bad. It's inconsistent.
Yeah, that's good. One thing on your bucket list that you really want to do, maybe you haven't done yet, or it's on your to-do list.
On my bucket list, I want to go to like Greece and Rome, like to go to like the Parthenon and to the Colosseum, like, you know what I mean? Just sort of do all the ancient civilization stuff. Same thing with Egypt, actually. I'd love to go and check out the pyramids and that kind of stuff.
Okay, so last question. I ask everyone this on my podcast, all right? If you could pick any character in a movie or a TV series and live in that reality, who would it be and why? And I'm pretty sure you won't choose Talia, because I don't think you want to live in her reality.
No, she's got a rough life. Yeah, no, she's got a rough life. I mean, she's kind of cool, but that's a rough life. I don't know. Oh man. Because like, let's face it, for anybody who's not white, anything prior to like 90 sort of sucks. It's not awesome. I say this as somebody who was born in the 70s.
I mean, a lot of people pick superheroes.
Yeah, like on the one hand, I was kind of thinking of like, I was thinking of like Game of Thrones, but that's a really harsh world for the women. I don't know. Yeah,
I've given you like the toughest question ever in an interview.
I think I'd be Captain Marvel. Let's just go with Captain Marvel, because she's way overpowered and hasn't experienced that much trauma. I mean, because let's face it, most superheroes experience a significant amount of trauma. We'll go with that.
I think that was a decent warm-up. Right. Okay, look, let's throw it back. I followed you on Twitter after I saw you on Arrow, and then I remembered like, oh wait, I remember her on Andromeda, and then I was like, it all started coming to me, and then I don't know what it was, but you followed me back. I'm not sure why.
Oh, because I'm just down to like anybody who seems slightly interesting.
Thank you.
So it's like, oh yeah, that's neat. Usually, like what happens, like not everybody, but like usually with somebody with it, this is the other thing too, somebody who has a blue check mark. I'm just like, oh, who do I know this person, or that kind of thing. And then so it's like, oh, that looks, Islah looks really cool.
It's crazy how like a blue tick can change things for you.
Well, do you know what's really funny? I didn't think anything of it, and it was when I was on, I think it was when I was on The Arrangement. I got like blue checked on everything.
Blue ticked.
On social media, blue ticked. I got blue ticked on social media. And it was so funny because the way my kids reacted, because I'm an old, so like social media is one of those things that I think is fun, but isn't like integral to my life. And and my kids were like, "You're verified? Oh my God, that's so cool. Can you get me verified?" Like it was a whole thing. And I'm like, I don't know what any of that means.
Yeah, because I mean, I guess you came into acting in the industry at a time where social media wasn't around. It was just auditions and everything was on like newspapers and like TV magazines.
Totally. Like you had to collect your clippings.
Yeah.
Like all of your press and stuff like that. You'd need to kind of like collect it. I actually have a file of like all old like newspaper clippings and it's or magazine covers or that kind of thing. Cover one. I was on one. But and it's funny because my kids are kind of like, "Oh, that's so cool, that's so retro," and I'm like, "Shut up."
I mean, it's not that old. I mean, I'm a 90s baby. Yeah. I'm a 90s baby. I turned 30 in April, but I remember the time when I was like, we had like 4 channels in the UK.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and I remember watching Channel 5 get launched, and my TV was like this huge.
Yeah.
It looked like Alien, the back of like Alien. How did you get into acting?
Well, it was something that I always wanted to do when I was a kid. But again, it's that thing about why representation is so important, because it wasn't something that I thought I could do. Like professionally. It was just this thing that, you know, people live in a box on the TV and actors are just, they're white, right? And so, but I was in like every school play I could be part of and, you know, that kind of thing. And then as I got a little bit older, I was in an arts program when I was in high school. And a friend of mine wanted to be a model. And she had found some modeling school, which, by the way, for anybody who doesn't know, is a bullshit thing. Like modeling schools are not a thing. They're not. Sure, go and learn how to stand up straight and walk, but that will not get you a career as a model, by the way. But you know, she didn't know that, and so she was sort of like, "Will you come do this with me?" And so I was like, "Okay, yeah, sure." And it turned out that the teachers in the modeling school were actual real models with real modeling agencies, and one of them pulled me aside after class one day and said, "Okay, this whole thing is bullshit. Here's the name of my agency and a couple of other real agencies. Go and see them." And I'm short. I'm only like 5'5", so I'm not really model height. But I was taken on by a modeling agency who did most of the commercial stuff. And that's how I got kind of into the industry through this sort of sideways way of, I never really wanted to model and I was rubbish at it. But through that, I got cast in like a couple of commercials, and then I met actors who became good friends of mine. And they were like, "Wait a minute, if you want to be an actor, come meet my acting agent." And so ended up leaving a modeling agent, going with an acting agent, and then that's how kind of I got into the business of acting. It's
an unconventional way, but I guess it just proves like who you know, right?
Yeah. Anybody who says that this business isn't who you know,
yeah,
it's totally possible to get into the business without knowing anybody, but it's so much easier when you start to know people.
Do you think like social media has changed the way we connect? I mean, if it wasn't for Twitter, me and you would not be having this conversation.
Absolutely. I think it's totally changed. I think it's democratized the industry in a way that it wasn't before. Like when I was coming up, if you wanted to make a short film, my God, you had to get a 60mm camera. You had to buy film. You had to get lights. You had to get people who knew how to do all that. You had to pay for the processing and the development of the film. Then you had to pay for an editing suite because it physically needed to be edited. Like you had to cut the actual film itself. So, you know, to just have an idea and make a short film was cost prohibitive for most people. Now you can do something really cool on your fucking iPhone and put it up on YouTube. It can, you know what I mean? Or like put it on Instagram or on Twitter and it can go viral. Or if you know just a couple of the right people, they can get it into eyes in front of people.
It's actually how I started. So growing up, I wanted to, well, my mom was kind of, I don't want to use the word pressure, but she's an Asian mom. So Asian pressure. But she wanted me to study like English and all the kind of boring subjects. And for some reason, I was just not good at it. And then I failed like over here in this country, we call it GCSEs. It's like your first exams. Failed them, and to continue into college and university, I had to take on a lower level subject in a different kind of area. So then that's when I discovered media production. And then once I studied that, I realized how much I loved it, how good I was at it. And then I wanted to really create something. And then YouTube started being the platform. And I made a series called Corner Shop. And it was just about a guy who, looks after his dad's corner shop. And then I just went along with it, and I was writing episodes myself and taking inspiration. I actually took a lot of inspiration from Arrow at one point.
Oh, you're kidding?
Yeah, literally, there's so many Arrow references in there. And then I started realizing the power of the internet and how much representation actually meant. But I didn't realize what I was getting myself into. I was just kind of having fun with it. And then 6 years later, we've done so many campaigns for charity. We've like performed on stages. The last episode, we made it into a movie, and then we screened it at one of the biggest cinemas in London. And then literally all of this was with no budget. Literally,
That's
I
amazing.
saved up behind, working behind a cash desk in a store.
Wow.
And just grinding, literally.
It's amazing.
That's how I started YouTube, and then from then I just got more and more opportunities, and here I am.
Yay! No, but I
So,
love
yeah.
stories like that, because you can't, like, that's the thing of like, there was so much gatekeeping, and there still is, and you still see them trying to gatekeep in this business in terms of like what constitutes a real show, right? Or what constitutes a real movie or a real opportunity. In the sense of like, it used to be that things like even sci-fi, anything in the science fiction realm was considered genre and not real, like not, it's not a big deal. And like my husband, for example, he worked on a show called Stargate SG-1 for 10 years. That show ran.
I love Stargate as a kid.
Right. And it ran for like 10 years, but here's the thing, it never got any kind of attention or traction in terms of like even in Canada, we have our own screen awards. They are currently called the CSAs, the Canadian Screen Awards, but they used to be divided up into two categories, the Geminis and the Genies. The Geminis were for TV and the Genies were for film. Let's just say we don't produce enough content in each of those two categories that they married them together and just made them one category. But the interesting thing is like, they never got, like, they would get nominated. And again, the process for nomination is just so ridiculous in terms of you have to pay for your nominations and submit yourselves and all that kind of stuff. So it's not a democratized kind of thing in the first place, but they would get ignored for special effects.
A sci-fi getting ignored for special effects?
It's kind of like, whatever, like it's sci-fi, it's not a real show. And you're like, but you gave it to a children's show. Like, politics again, right? So it's like it's a weird kind of thing, and I'm loving the democratization of that. And I think the internet has so much to do with that, because where things like sci-fi and fantasy were these like, niche market for nerds, right? Is like, that's no longer the case. It's a legitimate, same thing with comic books. Like even you think of The Simpsons and the comic book guy, the character.
Yeah.
Who's this, balding, overweight, like nerdy guy who is really irritating to talk to with no social skills. It's like, there are people that grew up reading comic books that are, pardon my language, very fucking cool.
Yeah, like I used to
creating the cool things, right?
My mom used to take me to the library when I was a kid, and then it was one of the first times I was going, and then the children's area was like really colorful and all these kind of books and stuff. And then I looked to where like all the adults were, and then I saw another colorful area, and I was like, hold on, that shouldn't be there. That's the children's area. So I walked over, and that's when I discovered Superman, Batman, Marvel, Thor, Captain America, and I started reading these books, and that's when I discovered superheroes. So like seeing them come alive on screen as I was growing up, like the first superheroes I saw was like the Punisher, Blade, and then the X-Men movies started coming, Spider-Man.
Oh,
yeah,
so good, right?
I just grew up in that era where they were coming alive. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned representation, right? How different is it in the US? Because over here, it is a lot harder. Like people of my color. So my parents are from Bangladesh, and people from my ethnic community, they don't take up roles like acting. They don't take careers it's very rare. I mean, it's becoming more accessible now than it was when I started, but in terms of like getting roles and being casted or even working behind the scenes, it's really rare. Like, what is it like in the US? Like, and what does representation mean to you as well?
I think it's getting better, especially in front of the camera. It's getting better, but it's still. This is an unpopular opinion. It still smacks of tokenism in some respects, because I have this opinion that you can't take the color without the culture. And when you have, what was the phrase that I heard recently that was so good? Palm-colored people.
Palm-colored people?
Yeah, like meaning white people, like they're palm-colored. Yeah, palm-colored people.
Yeah,
I just thought that was hysterically funny. But anyway, but when you have homogenization behind the camera, let's just go with homogenization, because I am really coding that for white people. But when there are too many white people in the decision-making categories, and they recognized we need diversity, they aren't necessarily looking laterally behind the camera and saying, okay, we need to bring more diversity in behind the camera. They just go, we need faces of color in front of the camera. So you get casting breakdowns that say stuff like any ethnicity. No, they don't mean that for 1 and 2 on the call sheet. Straight up, I've been told that. So you sit there and you're like, okay, white. So the leads on the show are probably still going to be white, but they're going to cast everybody else as a person of color. The problem is, though, is they don't necessarily bring culture with that, right? So like, I've been on shows where they're like, oh yeah, no, we want you to be Filipino and so on and so forth. But then they do stuff like at a dinner scene, they don't take into consideration that, you know, like but most Filipino households, you eat with a spoon and a fork. There is rice with every meal. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's things like that where you sit there and you go, that's culture. Like, and you don't have to hang a lantern on it. You don't have to point at it. But I don't know a single Filipino household where you're just having like a weekly dinner and there's like, you know, mashed potatoes and peas on the table. Like, that's just not how we eat.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where you sit there and you're like, you can't just take the color without the culture. And the only way that I know how to fix that is to allow actors, if you're going to hire actors of color, to bring that to life and discuss with them ahead of time. It's like, okay, so we're doing this dinner scene, right? What's happening at dinner, right? If you're going to have a party that takes place at that character's house, have background performers of that culture in the scene, right? Like that kind of stuff. And that's when it starts to feel less like tokenization and more like inclusion, to me anyway. And that's important too, because people want to know, like, even when you think of things like, I'm sure you probably experienced this growing up, because I did. It's like, I never wanted a Tupperware full of chicken adobo at school. I wanted a peanut butter and jam sandwich. Because it's right. Like, it's like now my kids would love to have, you know, when they were growing up and going to school, that's, you know, I think in terms of real life, how we've progressed, they would love to have, and they very much love to have like rice and adobo in their lunchbox. When I sent them to school, they loved it. Right. Because that was some of the favorite food that they ate at home. But when I was a kid, you were weird, right? It was weird to have that, and you never wanted to stick out. So you want to see that representation on screen in front of you. It's so important.
I think in the UK, it's like if we have one Asian show, and when I say Asian here means brown. And if you're referring to everything else, it's East Asian. If there's like one South Asian show, that's all they'll need. They'll be like, oh yeah, we've got one.
It's like check the box. We have our brown show.
So it's a lot harder. Do you write as well? Is that something you've explored?
No, I don't. And it's funny because I kind of did like just write stories when I was younger. As I've gotten older and I've gotten better at understanding how fucking hard it is to do that, I'm like, yeah, I know. So have you suggestions here and there, but like to craft a script, because I've read so many of them and realize how hard it is to actually structure a script. Like, it's one thing to tweak dialogue. I'm actually pretty good at tweaking dialogue. But to structure a script, that whole journey, and like 3-act structure, 4-act, 5-act structure, and all that kind of stuff, my mind is blown. It's like sorcery to me. I've
been writing since I've started, because of the mere fact that there are no roles for someone like me. And if there are, you know, not saying I haven't had any roles. I've done like, I was in the commercials for the Men in Black movie.
Fantastic. Right.
Yeah, I played like a Men in Black agent. I've done like TV work and stuff. in the UK, but then it's always been like security guard or the friend who's on for like 30 seconds, or just like a throwaway character. I've never had like a meaningful a role apart from like maybe one or two, but it's never the lead. It's never like something that represents my people, and I've always had to make my own content to shine. So like my current situation now, me and my friend Robert Hong, who's British Chinese, and my friend Michael Trung, who's also British Chinese, we came together and we wrote a series called Take Awaysion. And it's about I'm glad you laughed. That's great. That's a good time. It's about a British Chinese guy and a British Bangladeshi guy who are running a Indo-Chinese takeaway, and they're both chasing a career in the entertainment industry while they're hiding it from their parents.
Perfect. Right.
And like honestly, we had the script ready. We wrote the pilot episode. I made the treatment. And there's like a process. So and as far as I've got in my career, it's still hard to kind of know that right person. So I got introduced to a couple of people. The kind of feedback I got from broadcasters was like, oh, it's too similar to something else. And then when I saw what they were talking about, I was like, that's not similar at all. Like, I mean, the last time I saw a Chinese guy and a brown guy together was Harold and Kumar. So this is completely different. And it's like they didn't understand how different this was, Right. And this is what I mean by checklist. Because if they've already got a brown show, they're like, oh, we don't need it. So
we
it's
don't
like
need another brown show.
The struggle of kind of pitching in this country is like.
Have you tried? Like, can you pitch to like Amazon or Netflix or anything like that in the UK? Like, is that a thing there?
So this is the thing, right? I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to have that conversation, but I don't know anyone like.
Right.
Like, is it?
I don't even know. Like, I wouldn't even know how to do that either. Like, I think I've got a couple of friends that I could probably ask. You know what I mean? Just to say, hey. But they're like, the thing is most like, for example, I live in Vancouver, which is in Canada. So the industry in Canada, as much as everybody here will not admit it, it is very much, there is a domestic industry here, but it's so small comparatively speaking to the American market, simply because so much of our media comes from America. So we're, especially in Vancouver, often considered sort of more of a satellite of LA. So we're a service town, meaning the majority of work here is actually American productions that come up to Canada to shoot because it's cheaper. And so most of my friends that are showrunners are still hired guns. So they aren't the ones who necessarily pitched the show. They do know the executives, and they can probably get some pitch meetings with the right executives because they know who they are, but they're not the ones who, they're not the creators of the shows. I think I know Simon Barry, who created a show called Continuum, and he's doing a show currently called Warrior Nun, I think with Netflix. I think he's kind of one of the few people that I know that actually physically pitches shows that he created. So
it kind of is just as hard over there than it is over here.
But I do know, like, for example, you always hear the rumors, right? Netflix is desperate for content. If you have anything, pitch it to Netflix.
Yeah, I see those like newsletters and stuff. I'm like, okay, cool. But then it's like, you never.
How? Yeah. Where? Do you have an email? Like, what am I? Who do I call? Yeah. So yeah, that kind of stuff. But I don't really know. Like, I guess maybe you could just. It sounds weird, but like try and Google who the creative executives are.
Yeah, I guess
for content creation or whatever at like Netflix, and cold call them or cold pitch them.
There's like a internet stalk you could do to kind of figure it out. But
totally, which it shouldn't come down to that, but
yeah. And I mean, there's so many advice people give. Like, some people say you should walk in with someone who has a bigger name, then you have a better chance. Right. I don't know. It's just so hard, man. It's just so hard. But
it is. But you're young. You're so young. Like, so there's a load of time. I know it doesn't feel like it because you just turned 30, but from somebody who's 48, trust me, 30 is young.
No, honestly, I would take advice from my elders very, very well, and I'm open to like that sort of advice and wisdom and stuff. So good. Next, I wanted to talk to you about the activism that you do. Because like when I hit your profile, I barely saw any acting, and I saw so much support for campaigns like BLM. And the reason I want to talk to you about that is because I do it too, obviously. And when things like when it kicked off in Palestine again, I was in the protests and the marches. When things happen in the world, I do what I can. But does it affect your career? Because as actors, we both know, right? Sometimes you can get that email from like a producer, like, "Hey, you're gonna have to quieten down on this."
Cool it, yeah.
Or
it hasn't yet.
Yeah.
But I also don't know if it is, and I just don't know. Because that's the other thing, right? Like somebody, you might be up for a job, and they go and they check out your profile, and they go, "No, we're not gonna."
Yeah.
Like, so I have no idea if it's affected my career in some respects, and it does. I don't care.
Oh, okay. That was my question. I was like, what makes you so fearless? What makes you so fearless?
It's not fearless. It's the thing of like, you got to do what's right. There might be in terms of producers trying to tell an actor to cool it with whatever they're posting. There's a risk of public exposure for doing that. And I think maybe a lot of companies wouldn't. So if you're going to get affected, I honestly believe in North America, they just won't hire you and you won't know. That's my...
Does it like worry you? Like, I mean, so I was speaking to Michael Malarkey from The Vampire Diaries. And he was telling me, if, talking about things like Palestine is getting me in trouble with my career, then maybe that's not the career for me. And he was willing to like give it all up if that's the case. So like, is that the same with you? Like, would you like get anxious at all if something like that happened? Like, do you worry?
Not career wise. The only thing that I would feel anxious or reticent about posting about something is if I'm not very well informed about it. Right? That's the only thing, because I don't want to offend or hurt people directly affected. Like, fuck the industry. I don't really care about the acting part of it or like the career part of it. The only ththings that I would be reticent to post about are things that I don't know enough to pick a side.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it's because that's also a danger I think that happens on social media, is that people can get caught up in, posting one side of the story because it affects you, right? And which is totally understandable. But at the same time, it's like there's also another side to the story. There are certain aspects, things, colonialism, and that both sides is not a thing. It's not a thing, right? Like, there is no both sides to being to Black Lives Matter, right? There's no other sides to that. There's no other side. Like, there's some things that are very clearly not a both sides issue. Yeah. In Canada, for example, the residential school situation and the mistreatment of the Indigenous peoples of Canada. There's no other side to that, like, right?
Yeah. It's just the truth. It's the side of the truth, right?
It's just the truth, right? So like from my part of the world, when there are parts of the world that I actually don't know a ton about it, I will do my best to post educational stuff if I can, or the stuff that I've learned, but also have to be open to being corrected and learning along the way. Yeah. But as far as, the career aspect of it, it is interesting because I've had a couple of people that are like, especially with the Free Palestine stuff, that are terrified of posting it. Not terrified, but they're kind of like, I don't want to offend anybody who's Jewish, which I get. I understand that. I wouldn't want to offend anybody, period, at the end of that. And that's one of those things where you sit there and you kind of go, yeah, I can see where you're coming from. But again, sometimes just posting the truth of a situation isn't okay, then that's just the truth. Do you know what I mean? Like the both sides issue. It's like there's just the truth. Like sometimes there's just the truth.
It's nice to like know that I'm not the only one.
No, you're not. And you know what? And the thing is especially like I said, in a day and age where content creation is something that, like, when I see, like, I just finished doing a TV series called Chucky.
Yeah, I still haven't watched it because Chucky freaks me out. Like,
oh no, and I will say this, it's funny. Like, it's like there's a whole lot of humor
literally, I would only watch it because I know you're in it. Like,
Right.
that is the only reason I'm gonna watch it, but I haven't got around
My
to doing
stuff, but funnily enough, my stuff isn't particularly funny, but the stuff with Chucky is hysterically funny, I think. But I was talking to my daughter's friend, my daughter who's 16 years old, she's turning 17. And her friends are like, where's it going to air? Like, where can we watch it? And I'm like, oh, it'll be on the USA Network and Sci-Fi, right? These are the two networks that it's going to air on. They're like, yeah, but is it going to air like on a real network? And I'm like,
what?
this is NBC Universal. What is a real network to you? And they're like, well, you know, like Netflix or like Amazon or, you know, something that we can watch, like YouTube.
What?
But this is the thing. But at the same time, when you look at the kids and their consumption of media, that's where they consume it from, right?
Yeah.
So when it comes to the democratization of content creation, you can have the gatekeepers not want to hire you because of your political stances. Okay, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to make my own shit and I'm going to put it on these other platforms and it's still going to be consumed and I'm still going to produce my art and I'm still going to make money at it. Right? So, you know, in terms of, again, the gatekeeping of who's going to get hired for what, I think that whole idea of that used to exist in Hollywood of like, I'll blacklist you, you'll never work in this town again kind of thing is bullshit. And I've always kind of had that opinion anyway, because I'm Canadian and I've made my career in Canada. So I've only ever worked in the States a few times and it's been on other shows that have brought me to America to work there. But otherwise, like I don't have American working papers. I live and work in Canada. So if an American show doesn't want to hire me, okay. I mean, there's not a huge domestic, there's not a huge domestic industry here in Canada that's self-sustainable, but there is one. And I'll work as an actor in Canada. I won't make as much money, but that's okay. Money's not everything.
I love it. I love the mindset. I love it. I went to watch ShangChi.
How was it?
I was
you
at
got
the
to see
premiere.
it already?
It was amazing.
I'm so excited.
I've watched it twice. I went to the.
It doesn't open here until the 3rd.
Yeah,
September,
it's same here, but they came to the UK for the screening and the premiere. So I attended both. I watched it twice. I met and interviewed Simu, Aquafina.
Oh, fantastic.
Benedict
Oh my
Wong.
God, dude, that's so dope.
Honestly, like this movie does not feel like a Marvel movie that's been done before. Like literally when I was watching it, I was like, I had to remind myself, oh yeah, this is Marvel. But it was so different and it was so cultured.
I'm so excited.
And honestly, like even as a South Asian, I was so proud. Like I was so proud. I mean, even saying that, I've got Chinese family. Like my on my mum's side and my dad's side, they've married into Chinese families, and I've got nephews that are Chinese, and my best friends are Chinese. I've written a show about Chinese.
Of course.
So
of course.
yeah, like it's I think just seeing that kind of inspires me because you know, it's like, you know, maybe you are going in the right direction. Like, do you feel that way as well?
I do. I definitely, like, from when I started, because I started acting about 30 years ago in Canada, and I was straight up told, and by people that were actually trying to help me, like it wasn't a gatekeeping thing. They were just being honest. That I probably wouldn't be able to have a career in this business. They straight up said, it's like, you're not gonna play the daughter. You're not gonna, because I was about 18 when we started, and it was like, you're not gonna play the daughter. You're not gonna play the sister. You know, that's a lot of the roles that you get when you're starting out, is like the daughter, the sister, you know, the love interest. They usually, you know, they like blondes, which is code for white, right? Because I can dye my hair blonde, right? So it was just this thing of like, you're probably not going to get cast as that. So I don't know if you're going to be able to have a career in this. But, you know, and I had casting directors tell me that, still bring me in. I mean, they were on my side. And they'd bring me in for everything. But like the number of times I've actually had producers straight up say to me, yeah, we wanted you for the lead, but, you know, the executives at the network wanted to go with someone else. And then you see who they cast, and it's somebody who's white. And you're like, right, I get it. And I am fully aware of my white adjacency, right? Like I'm fully aware that I'm not 100% Filipino. And my exoticness, and I put air quotes around that because I think we all know that that's also coded dog whistly kind of language, but that has got me a lot of work in the sci-fi realm, to be honest. So it has worked in my favor as well. It's just one of those funny things that it has changed. It really has, because when I was young, there were no faces that looked like mine. And the struggle was real in terms of getting cast on things and people not knowing what to do with me, because they're like, we don't really know what to do with you because you're so exotic. And I'm like, I'm not exotic. I'm a suburban kid, like, who's really boring. You know what I mean? Like, my life is uneventful and dull. And I grew up in the suburbs of Toronto. Really, there are a lot of people that are like me, but you know, in TV land, your ethnicity must be explained.
Oh man.
Which I'm rolling my eyes at, but that it was the thing. It's like, it had to be explained somehow. Well, how do we explain that you look the way you do? Like, I don't regularly have to explain my existence in my day-to-day life.
Yeah,
but I mean, that's how
it's, some roles can just be a role. And they just happen to
all
be...
roles can just be a role.
So, yeah. Like, I mean, when I made my series Corner Shop, every time I went on the radio about it, every time I was promoting it, you know, I'd get that whole like, oh, you know, so it's for the South Asian community. I'm like, no, everywhere has a corner shop. Like, I have cousins who live in New York, and they have a shop in Central Park, like, and it's a corner shop. Like, everyone goes to a corner shop. Everyone. You know, gets like milk and bread from a corner shop. Like, it just happens to be about a British Asian guy who's Muslim.
There was a hugely successful one that Simu Liu came from in Canada called Kim's Convenience. Yeah, which was also about a corner shop run by his Korean, you know, family. Yeah, it's like they exist everywhere. Like, I don't get it. But that's the funny thing, man. But that's the problem is that when you have that mentality. And then you have people behind the camera, and it is getting better because more and more executives and more people in hiring positions and creative positions behind the camera are people of color. It's just, there needs to be more. And the problem is right now there's a dearth of people in that regard because so many of us were talked out of it, right? Yeah. Like, we were sort of talked out of it either by our parents because we didn't see any representation and went, okay, that's not for me. Or we were talked out of it by people in the industry because we weren't given the opportunities. Like, I have actually had conversations with directors that have straight up said to me, well, I wanted to hire somebody of color in that role, but they weren't that good. And so I really needed somebody who was good. And I was like, let me be very clear. When I started out, I was shit. I was rubbish. I was fucking terrible. Like, so many people, especially because there's so many things that you learn on camera that you only learn from working. There's no school, there's no class you can take, there's no workshop that you can take that will teach you the things that you learn working on a set, right? Even if it's just calming the fuck down and not being nervous when they call action, right? Like, that's just something that you get conditioned to by being on set. Yeah. And if I only got better because I got more opportunities. If you don't take the risk and hire somebody who you think maybe isn't very good and give them a shot, they're not going to get better, which is why, because I've heard it a million times, it's like we want to hire somebody to play your parent, but we can't find anybody, we can't find a racially appropriate person to play your parent who's actually good. And I'm like, you're probably not wrong in that it's not about being good, but it's about being experienced. But it's because they've been talked out of it, because they left the industry, because they couldn't support themselves, because they couldn't make a career at it. So you have to, if you're going to correct that, you have to make allowances. It's a bit of a catch-22 that executives and people in hiring positions will try and pull out, but it's a bullshit excuse, in my humble opinion. As
frustrated as we both are, let's celebrate some of the wins. I'm a massive superhero fan, right? Marvel, DC, the whole works. Talia al Ghul, obviously everyone first saw her in the Dark Knight trilogy. I watched an interview where you didn't actually watch the Dark Knight, right?
No, I haven't. I still haven't seen it. Okay. I've seen a bit of it, but I haven't seen it.
In a way, that's good because you came with a fresh take on it, right? For Talia.
Yeah, I had it. Like, I mean, I did the internet dive because I didn't have the time to go to the comic book shop and find every single storyline that had Talia al Ghul in it. So I did the Wikipedia storyline, but I mean, I spent a few hours and continually, not like just the one time, kind of learning what I could about Talia, and the League of Assassins and all that kind of stuff and her relationship. But the thing about Arrow is the Arrowverse is different from the comic
completely
interpretation of a lot of characters. Like, I don't even know if Talia had anything to do with Arrow in the comics. She's kind of like, she's Batman's baby mama.
Yeah.
So when I was doing Talia al Ghul, part of the problem with doing Talia is that I never met the actor who played Ross or Race. They were never quite clear how it was pronounced.
Yeah, I didn't understand.
They kind of went back and forth. But I never met the actor who played Ross al Ghul, and he's Australian. So I think when he did it, he actually did sort of his Australian accent. And then Katrina Law is also American and did an English accent. And it was very funny because the way I got cast on that show, I got a call from my agent. I think it was like on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. Yeah. And she said, do you want to do a few episodes of Arrow? I've got an offer here for you. And I sort of said, yeah, I'm totally down. Can I see some sides or a script or something? And they're very secretive on the CW shows, understandably so. And so she sent me over some sides, which for those that don't know is the portion of a script that you get either for an audition or that you're shooting that day. So it's not the entire script. And she said, this is not the character. This was written for the audition. And I'm like, okay. And the sides were basically a scene where whoever this person was talking to Oliver, and they had clearly trained them, right? And the character breakdown said that this character has trained Oliver Queen. And I went, okay, cool, yeah, I'm totally down. And so it was a Wednesday because my agent was like, we have to close on this because this goes to camera on Friday. Oh, I'm like, okay, great. Yeah, she's like, this is really quick. So we closed on the Wednesday. I got a call from the costume designer on the show, Maya Mani, who I had worked with before on a show called Continuum. And I also worked with her husband, Richard, who's an AD. I worked with him for years on Andromeda. So we knew each other well. And she's like, so we need you to come in for a wardrobe fitting tomorrow because this goes to camera Friday. It's just one scene initially. So we can tweak the costume after the fact, but we just need to get it ready to be on camera for Friday. And I'm like, no problem. So she goes, okay, I'll send you the memo. I'll email you the memo. And the memo on the top of the memo said Talia al Ghul wardrobe fitting.
Oh, so it gave it away.
Wait a minute, what? I'm like, wait, what? What do you mean I'm playing? So I go to the wardrobe fitting the next day and I say, Maya, am I playing Talia al Ghul? She's like, oh yeah, they didn't tell you. I'm like,
no way.
No, that's so cool. I believe she's half Chinese, half Arabic, which is an awkward thing to say because, Arabic is very unspecific, but that was sort of the idea. And I know Katrina is half Chinese, half white. I'm half Filipino, half like Scottish, Irish, kind of just whitey McWhite. So I guess they needed somebody local that they could hire fairly quickly that was of mixed race, of vaguely the same genetic background. So it was me. So in terms of doing the accent, I remember on the day, I had one line on my first day of work and I sort of said, should I do this in an English accent? And the director was like, you know what? Yeah, I think so. Probably. We should ask Stephen because Stephen Amell was kind of the authority on the show. And I don't mean that in a way of like, just because he was the star. He was very involved and cares very much about the continuity. So he's the one who kind of keeps track of all the continuity because let's face it, he's in every episode. And so he was like, oh yeah, you should definitely have an English accent. And I'm like, okay, good. Let me just pull that one out of my butt. It wasn't very good. I had to work on it. Although there was at one point, there was one episode where I had watched a few too many episodes of The Crown.
Yeah.
So that I was sort of talking to all of her like
that was this. The Queen's English.
Yes, she was speaking very much like she was living in Buckingham Palace, darling. Yeah, it was a little, I had to adjust that a bit because it wasn't that good.
So did you have any training for the British accent? Or you just kind of winged it?
I kind of winged it, but like I grew up watching all BBC stuff that we get in Canada because my parents were fascinated by it. Plus, I also lived in England and I did an English television series in the late 90s where I didn't have an English accent, but because I lived there, I think I have a slightly more
Whereabouts in England did you live? Sorry, I'm just shocked. I did not know this about you.
That's all right. I lived in Chelsea. I lived at the Sloane Square end of the King's Road. Yeah.
Speaking of like your adaptation of Talia, right? Season 7 in the prison. Oh my god, that fight scene in the hallway
was amazing, wasn't it?
Prison, that honestly, I always say this, season 1 of Arrow, like the storyline, the cinematography, the fight scenes, everything, that was perfect. And you know, somewhere along the line it dipped up and down. But season 7, that fight scene in the hallway was like, oh my god, this is season 1 all over again. Like, yeah. It was so cool. Honestly, I think that's the most badass I've seen you before, like in your entire...
And you know, I can take no credit for it. That was mostly my stunt double, because Eli and Bam Bam, Eli was the stunt coordinator, and James Bamford. I can't remember with Bam Bam if he could, I don't think he was coordinating. I think he was already directing at that point.
Whenever James is directing an episode, you always know there's going to be like action.
He worked on Stargate SG-1, so my husband's known him for years too. But the funny thing is like one of my first fight scenes, I think it was one of the big ones that I had with Katrina, but I'm like, it was going to camera. And the thing about Arrow, okay, I got to talk about the action on Arrow. They have that down to a fine science. Yeah. By the time I joined the show, they have that shit is down. I watched Steven do a fight scene that usually when you see a fight scene on the call sheet, you're like, okay, this is going to take all day. I'm going to be sitting in my trailer for hours if I'm not in this. Like most of the day. Yeah. He learned a fight scene because he didn't have time to spend a lot of rehearsal. But this is how much, like, Stephen Amell is an elite athlete. I don't think people totally understand how athletic and how physically intelligent he is. He learned a fight scene against 5 guys. No, I think it was actually 10. And learned it.
He really is the Green Arrow.
Learned it and shot it. Yeah, like he really is. Learned it and shot it. And I know his stunt double Will, and this is what's actually kind of funny. His stunt double Will used to teach my kids gymnastics when they were young.
No way.
Gymnastics and Taekwondo when they were little. And because I saw him on set, and I'm like, Will, and he's like, and I'm like, my kids, Mia and Sam, and he's like, oh my God, how are they? Like, it was just a funny thing. Yeah. But so Will is also very good, but the two of them working together in terms of Will teaching Stephen and Stephen being able to learn the fight choreography like that. So needless to say, they kind of have an expectation that most of the actors can do that. And because I did fight stuff on Andromeda, Bam Bam was like, oh yeah, she can get this. And I'm like, that was 20 years ago. I'm not that good anymore. So I literally called him and I'm like, Bam, do I need to come in and rehearse? And he's like, no, it's okay. We've already got it. We'll just stick you in for tops and tails, which means at the beginning of the scene, they have me all this kind of stuff and they will stick me in for certain shots where I'm like throwing a punch, but then they cut back to the other shot. Yeah. They edit it like in rehearsal, they know exactly the shots they need. They know exactly the angles they need. They know when they're going to use the stunt person to when they're going to use the actor. And they'd love to use the actor as much as possible, but they've actually got it down to such a fine science that they know exactly when they need to use the actor. So it was like seamless. Hallway fight scene did not take that long to shoot.
Wow.
And it's because of the stunt team. They are the best in the business. They are top.
Honestly, that's probably one of my favorite fight scenes in the whole of Arrow.
I loved it because I looked so badass.
Yeah, you look so cool. I just remember the one bit where like you went under a guy's, you held onto his shoulder. I don't know if it was a stunt double you, and then you kind of flipped. Yeah, that was dope.
She's amazing. She was amazing. Got one of those guys, Bob, right?
Yeah, I'll beat him up as much as I can. But I learned martial arts when I started when I was 17, and my uncle is my master, and it's a Korean military mixed martial art. So it's not like a sport; it's an actual martial art. So it comes with the discipline, the culture, the character, and all the moves are like in its raw form. For me, it's a dream to kind of convert my martial arts skills onto camera. But the first fight scene I ever tried to do, it was so hard because real martial arts and fighting on camera is so different, because it's
completely different.
The thing you do on camera is like against martial art rules, and like my uncle and my master is like, I can't do this. It just goes against everything I believe in. Basically,
to fight on camera, if you ever tried to fight in real life the way you do on camera, you'd get your ass kicked because it's bad fighting. But it looks good for camera.
Yeah.
Like throwing a wild punch like this is the worst thing you can do in an actual fight. Yeah. But on camera, it looks good.
Unless
So
you're
it's
Jackie,
kinda
and
hard.
because Jackie, everything is shot in a wide shot, and he does it all for real.
You know who else? There's Michael Jai White is amazing.
Yeah,
I did
Michael
a
J. White is
movie.
crazy.
He's crazy good. I did a movie. My husband and I both did a movie with Michael Jai White and an actor who has sadly since passed, but his name is Darren Shilavi, who was also a martial artist and amazing. And the two of them had to do a fight scene that they choreographed themselves because the director was not really on top of it.
Yeah.
So these two guys choreographed themselves and they shot it in what, half an hour? Half an hour, 45 minutes. They choreographed it in less than half an hour, and they shot, and I'm talking about flying kicks that are missing the nose by this much, because that's how exact they are and that's how perfect they are. So being an actual martial artist is a huge benefit to you as an actor. Yes. Because you can adjust.
I'm doing something right.
Huge benefit. You are totally doing something right. It's a huge benefit to you as an actor.
If you could return to the Arrowverse as Talia, would you? And what show would you return on, and what would that return look like?
Oh wow, yes, I would absolutely return to the Arrowverse as Talia, and on any of the shows. I think probably the one that would make the most sense would be Batwoman, though.
You reckon?
Yeah,
like Gotham,
I reckon,
right?
Yeah, just because it's Talia al Ghul, right? Like in Gotham and that the Batverse, I guess.
Yeah.
What but
would
yeah,
that return look like?
I would do it in a heartbeat. I don't know, because like my whole thing, my take on Talia, given the Arrowverse, like I pictured her off-camera life probably very differently than the writers pictured her off-camera life. Because to me, I think Talia's danger isn't just in her physical abilities. It's in her intelligence. And so I could just as easily see her. I saw her as, in terms of being a powerful nemesis to Oliver Queen at the time, as being somebody who could just as easily handle a hostile takeover of one of his companies, as much as kicking his ass. Or, like with the League of Assassins. And now particularly that's not really her thing anymore, seemingly. Yeah. Last time we left off in the Arrowverse.
I want to see Talia come back to Gotham City with her son, Damian Wayne.
Oh yeah. Well, isn't he on? So is it Titans? What's that other show? He's not really part of the Arrowverse.
Yeah, he's not introduced on Titans yet. There's no mention of him or anything. I'm hoping they introduce Damian Wayne on Titans. It would make sense.
Right.
But that's how I kind of imagine it, because it's like that would be a reason for Talia to go back to Gotham City, and look for the bat. Lexa, thank you so much for spending time with me.
My pleasure.
Honestly,
my pleasure. Anytime.
It's so fulfilling. Just meeting someone who has succeeded as much as you have, and all the achievements you've made over the years, and still making time for people like me. Like I'm practically a nobody on the other side of the globe, but you made time.
That's not true. Don't say stuff like that, because I'm going to tell you something. Years ago, like honest to God. So just so you know, for anybody who's out there who ever sits there, especially when you're younger and you're like, I'm nobody, I'm not anywhere yet. That's bullshit. In the last season of Andromeda, we had a guest star on the show whose name you might find familiar because her name is Kobe Smulders. She went on to do pretty well for herself. An actress by the name of Grace Park, who did background on Andromeda and then came on to play a guest star on the show, has also gone on to do pretty well for herself. Like, there are a lot of people that I have met along the way. Two of the writers who worked on Andromeda, Ashley Edward Miller and Zach Stentz, who were writing partners. I don't think they are anymore, but they're friends of mine, went on to do the first Thor movie and X-Men First Class. So you never know who people are going to become. And that also includes you. You never know who you are going to become.
Much.
And who you are going to go on to do well. So don't ever say that about yourself, that, I'm just nobody on the other side. That's bullshit. I will not accept that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Honestly, I just love how humble you are. I love that you, not that I've known you all your life, but I love how you haven't changed. I can tell you haven't changed. I just love I think it honestly is. You guys have the best weather and the best character.
Yeah.
Honestly,
being Canadian.
Thank you so much for your time, and I hope we can carry on connecting. Thank you so much.
Okay, no,
Bye,
no
Lexa.
problem. Take care.